Well, Lauren, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
Greetings. I am so happy to be here today because we're going over something. We're going over a story of a woman who wanted to get away from her husband, and I totally relate to that sentiment right now.
Wow. Whoa. Are you currently, corresponding? Actually, I don't want to spoil anything, but are you planning a Gone Girl moment yourself?
Everything's on the table at this point. Kagan has been recovering from stem cell therapy and also sick and not in a great mood now for like a week and a half.
Ugh.
And it's been a journey. It's been a winding road for me as a wife, trying to be supportive, but also,
Annoyed.
Annoyed at how annoyed he is. So,
well, as someone who also lives with her partner, I live in sin, though. We are not married like Lauren and Kagan.
right.
Like, while the other person's mood may, quote unquote, not be about you, it certainly affects you. Certainly can ruin your day.
And I feel like a guy, he's walking by as a woman on the street, and I just want to be like, what about a smile?
Literally.
What about a smile? That's what I want to suggest.
If you could smile more, people would like you more. I could not agree more. I think that, that's something like I have definitely, thought about in my own brain a lot, because I'm a person who I think just like tries to make herself as pleasing as possible to other people. And I don't even realize how much I'm doing it, how many times I'm, just like softening my edges. And
right, exactly.
I just think men everywhere could really soften their edges.
Oh my gosh, why don't we pass the torch to them to be pleasing and delightful and to, add to the general splendor of our environments with their cute outfits and their fun pizzazz.
I would like men to apologize more unnecessarily.
No,
because
exactly.
I feel like I'm making apologies constantly for passing by somebody for no reason, and the world would be a much better place.
This is like a little bit of a tangent, but I just cannot believe how much we expect of women in this world. Like, I was thinking the other day about my future and my life and like children and all of that, and I was just like, I just can't believe how much is expected of women.
I completely agree. There's so much on our plate. I think also at any given point, we are expected to be like 4 things at once. And, running daily life. We're expected to be a house manager, a girl boss, an event planner, someone who's already thinking potentially about birthday gifts for the other person's family. Like my brain is somehow able to be turning over, these types of errands and this type of to-do list all the time. And I just don't think men are equipped to do that. Like they're just not thinking that forward. And it's honestly, it's shocking. And
it's utterly, utterly shocking. So I would love to do a feminist rant at some point on the pod. I think it's necessary, but all is to say, I think this is a gorgeous preamble to why any woman might feel the need at some point to just split.
And this is why Lauren and I are Sherri Papini stans. We stand firmly with Sherri. And we think everything that she did, from November 2nd, 2016 and on to present day was totally warranted. Let's begin.
Justice for Sherri. Justice for Sherri. And here's my feeling. It's like, why aren't more women breaking down like this and freaking the fuck out and faking a kidnapping? Because when I look at the amount that is expected of women, this to me seems normal. Like, are you kidding me? Completely normal, girl.
Okay. Well, Lauren, it was a normal day. Also, it took me a while to break down what you were spelling out. It was a very normal day in November of 2016 when Sherri and Keith began a seemingly, once again, normal day. All right. So
can I say something?
Please. Yeah. I know when there's a pregnant pause from you.
Pause. You can see me inhaling. Okay. Just a disclaimer. I have come to this episode as the voice of the audience. I actually didn't do any research. All I know is that Sherri Papini, I know the gist, but I don't know any of the details. So I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to ask details. This is how we have organized the episode. This is on purpose. This is kind of how Chandler and I do it. A lot of times she'll be the voice of the audience. I only say that because on the Maddie Healy deep dive, someone on YouTube's like, the bitch on the left has no idea what's going on. She can barely keep up. And so I'm like, I just need to disclaim this is how we're doing it,
Lauren,
folks.
You got to stop reading the YouTube comments. It's literally like uncovering a manhole and then slipping yourself inside to like the gutters of the world. Just don't read the YouTube comments.
I know, but I want to do my best to reply to people.
Oh, that's nice. I actually didn't even know we were replying. So thank you. You really do a lot. Literally, the reason why I am leading this deep dive is because Lauren does so much work. It's the least I can do. I also was maybe more familiar with the case. So yeah, and also I thought you were giving this preamble because you were worried that people were like, Lauren's not, steamrolling Chandler as much. Is everything okay? Lauren's not, speaking for 4 minutes uninterrupted. Is everything good?
No, exactly. I just want to assure people I am in good health. Okay. I'm not about to drop out of this podcast. It is July 22nd when we're recording. We're pre-recording.
Okay.
So the day after Joe dropped out. Yeah.
I have a small tangent really quick, super quick. I ran into a beloved friend and fan, Sophie, of the podcast at a party over the weekend. And she said to me like, oh my gosh, like I was listening to the podcast and like Lauren mentioned that you were like about to drop out. You were about to quit the podcast. And I literally couldn't even remember. It took me like a full 10 minutes to figure out why I had like threatened that. And I just
the Beyonce drama? Is that what it was
no,
over?
It was some other stuff that I didn't even want to discuss. I eventually remembered. We can offline about it later on. But it was just so funny. And it was honestly a lesson to myself about my own theatrics that maybe I shouldn't, threaten to quit as much because it doesn't help the pod. But anyway.
It doesn't help the pod. And honestly, it doesn't help our donors and our constituents. It doesn't help people have, faith in you as a host and your ability to execute, Chandler. So stick with it.
I completely agree. I need to put my own feelings second of the future of the podcast first.
Absolutely.
Like old Joe did. Okay. Well, Lauren, back to 2016, back to, days before Trump would get elected. On November 2nd, 2016, Sherri Papini, a petite, long blonde-haired, beautiful woman, went for a jog, a normal jog. She had dropped her kids off at daycare that day, and she had even texted her husband, Keith, and said to him, come home for lunch, quote unquote.
Okay. Why is that quote unquote?
Because it wasn't really for lunch. It was for other activities, other marital activities.
Oh, really? Okay. So they were still hot and heavy.
Allegedly. We'll see.
Okay.
But anyway, Sherri goes out for a jog. She does not come back from this jog. Keith does not come home for lunch. He returns to their home in Redding, California later that night and does not find Sherri or his children there. They have a 4-year-old named Tyler and a 2-year-old named Violet.
Okay, I have a question. What does Keith do? Like, what's the picture of is this a normal, middle-class family?
Thank you for asking.
Is he the second to Amazon with Jeff Bezos? Who is this person?
So Sherri had a job with AT&T, but she had been laid off recently, and she had a big severance package from AT&T. Keith worked I'm pretty sure he worked for like Best Buy Tech Squad or Geek Squad.
Okay.
So he was in like, not like he wasn't a salesperson at Best Buy, but he was like a technical person. Tech services.
So he's like on the Genius Bar at Best Buy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know that at one point he did work for Geek Squad. So just, normal family, definitely not rolling in it. And Sherri had the severance package from AT&T, and she was staying home with the kids at this point and kind of living off the severance package. But she was still putting her kids in daycare. Just like, we're going to get to that. But that was like a point of contention for Keith.
Okay.
So Keith comes home. His wife is not there. His children are not there. It's a normal night. He got home at 5 p.m. It's very weird that they're not there. He can't get a hold of Sherri, not picking up her phone. He then calls the daycare to say, hey, what time did my wife pick up the kids? And the kids are still there. They hadn't even been picked up from daycare. Okay. So he starts to then get very worried because this is really out of the norm for Sherri because she's, a super mom. She's really hands-on. She loves her kids. It doesn't make any sense that her kids would have just been left at daycare. So Keith then uses Find My iPhone and traces Sherri's phone to their mailbox, which is about a mile in from their property. So I think like in Redding, California, I think a lot of the houses are kind of set back, a little bit more like rural. So he initially thought, well, maybe she took the kids for a walk and to go get their mail. But he finds just her phone and her headphones attached to it, just like discarded next to the mailbox. And there are strands of her hair wrapped up in the headphones.
Okay.
So this is when Keith knows that instantly something has gone very, very wrong. It's gone from worrisome to sort of a nightmare, or, the worst day of his life. And so he dials 911 and opens up a missing person case. So I'm going to play that audio.
Okay.
I also want to say, quick setup, Keith and Sherri are very cute together. Sherri's just like literally like looks like a Barbie. And Keith is like kind of is darling. And they had met actually in like middle school or elementary school. And they were, I don't know if it was his first kiss or her first kiss, but it was one of their first kisses, like when they met, like when they were much younger. And then they like found their way back to each other. So they're like sort of like childhood friends, if you will.
And she's hot for sure.
Oh, she's gorgeous. Yeah, she's very cute.
I couldn't find her, so I called the daycare to see what time she picked up the kids. The kids were never picked up, so I got freaked out, so I hit, like, the Find My iPhone app thing. I found her phone, and it's got, like, hair ripped out of it, like, in the headphones. And I took a picture of her phone on the ground before I picked it up.
When's the last time you heard from her?
She sent me a text asking me if I was coming home for lunch. And I said, sorry, long day. And that was the last.
Do you know what she was wearing? Is there
no
something
idea.
she always wears?
I'm assuming she went running, so probably running athletic type clothes.
She run with a dog or by herself?
By herself. She just started running again.
Okay, so that's the 911 call, where he's sort of explaining what he's come home to.
Mm-hmm.
So let's back up a little bit more before we go back to November 2nd, 2016, and talk more about their early life, and more specifically, Sherri's early life. So she had a pretty dysfunctional family growing up. There seemed to be drug abuse, alcoholism, just instability in her home. And she even, left her home at a really young age. She dropped out of high school when she was 16 and she ran away. She lived in LA and then the Bay Area. And then during the early part of her 20s, she was just sort of couch hopping. She, had a lot of boyfriends, and her sister, who was a big character in this whole disappearance and story, said that she really never approved of like the guys that Sherri was dating. They never seemed like good characters. And so when Sherri started to date Keith, they were all so relieved because this was a good guy. He seemed to come from a good family. He just like, really seemed to be like a stand-up guy, especially compared to all of her previous boyfriends. Not to slut shame, but I touched on this earlier. It all started in middle school. He was in 7th grade and she was in 8th, and they had it was her first middle school kiss.
Cute.
And it's cute. And so, yeah, obviously they lost touch when she moved away. So they had this like sweet moment in adolescence, but obviously, due to instability and, Sherri was going through a tumultuous upbringing, and she like moved out, like I said. And in 2006, she actually married somebody named David Dreyfus, who was a platoon sergeant, and they were married for 2 years. And Sherri will reference David in, stories that she tells. And so that's why it's important to note that detail. So after her and David divorced, she moved back to the Reading area, and her and Keith got together. And, it was basically love at first sight. They were head over heels. She had a blog, and so we have like literal direct quotes from her where she says, by our 3rd date, we were head over heels in love and have spent every day together since. I've never been so happy. We always laugh and always smile. We enjoy each other's company and make a great team. We're best friends and a perfect couple. Keith had said, I guess God had a plan in the works years and years ago. It kind of came together and ended up being a very cool story. And then they were married in 2009.
Okay. I mean, I feel like this is a lot of women's stories. Like, we date a lot of unsavory characters, and then someone gallant, someone wonderful, a good guy walks into our life. Usually doesn't, start with a middle school kiss, but this kind of all tracks, right? With a normal trajectory. There's nothing jumping out at me that's like, this woman's going to go off the rails.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of people have really unstable upbringings, and a lot of people deal with trauma in that way, and then they meet somebody and they build a stable life for themselves, and that's kind of what it has appeared to be. But along the way, and we'll get into this a little bit later, there are breadcrumbs that sort of show Sherri's instability or Sherri's issues with honesty and just some of the lies that she would tell. So back to November 2nd, following the 911 call, a missing persons case is opened and their whole life changes. Over 100 volunteers, search for Sherri. Sherri's sister organizes all of this. She's pregnant at the time, but she really also kind of took care of Sherri when they were growing up. And so this was very devastating for her. It would kind of be like if it was just you and me and our family. And I was your younger sister and you had sort of taken care of me. I had dated some people you felt were unsavory, but I'd finally found the right guy, and I was living a stable life and we'd sort of made it out of this tough childhood. And then I went missing.
I think that siblings are obviously like the only people you really, really, other than your parents, that make you feel tethered on some level.
Absolutely.
And so, like, to your own experience, to be able to look back on your life. And so I can just imagine how devastated her sister was.
Right. And I think the other reason why I want to make sure that when I'm setting the scene that her sister is really a big part of this is that, when everything comes to light, there were just like so many victims of this story, whose lives had been upended and their worst nightmare had come true, thanks to what Sherri did. So another bit of context here. In Reading, there was another woman who went missing in 1998. Her name is Tara Smith. She also, went out for a walk, jog, whatever, and was never seen again. And she had similar physical characteristics to Sherri. And so I think like because they never found her or like remains of her or anything, the whole community was like, oh my gosh, is this like whoever, took Tara? Is this person striking again years later? Which, we know serial killers do.
Yeah, that definitely adds like an extra layer to it for sure.
Yeah.
Before we move on, Chandler, can we discuss the gorgeousness that is Clean Simple Eats protein powder, my favorite protein powder on God's green earth?
Lauren, this protein powder is the one we have been drinking since college, since the days where, we shared a little apartment. And just like our love for each other, we don't plan on stopping loving Clean Simple Eats anytime soon.
Here's the deal, everyone. Someone messaged me. They're like, no, really, is Clean Simple Eats that good? Like, is it good? Or are you just BSing us? I swear on my unborn child's life that Clean Simple Eats is truly delicious. Okay, I don't even care about the ingredient quality, but their ingredients are clean and grass-fed. And more importantly to me, it tastes like a Frosty, a Wendy's Frosty, but it's a gorgeous protein drink.
I mean, I don't even think about the taste of it, if that makes sense. Like the taste is so perfect and delicious and consistent that I don't even like think about the taste. Like it's just like, oh, I know this is going to be good.
It's a treat.
It's a treat. It's wonderful. It's 20 grams of protein per scoop, 110 calories. We love it. Our favorite flavors are the Simply Vanilla and the chocolate brownie batter, as well as the mint chocolate. I think you love, Lauren.
Yeah, I love the mint chocolate. It tastes like a thin mint Frosty, just blended with ice and water or maybe a little milk. You guys go to cleansimpleeats.com, use code POPAPOLOGIST for 10% off. Truly, it's my secret weapon to getting enough protein and feeling amazing, and it tastes delicious.
Popapologists, 10% off. So Keith Papini was the, initial number one person of interest. Obviously, we know that's very common with missing persons case. Yeah. And I guess you didn't watch The Perfect Wife on Hulu, but, Keith is very, in all of these police interviews, he's so earnest and open with the police. Like, if I was a police officer, I would have a hard time. And maybe, I'm not a police officer, so I don't actually know how they would feel, but he just really seems open and sincere. And he just like has all of his cards on the table and just seems very desperate. And he just doesn't seem like a guy who has a sinister side.
Does it seem like the police are influenced by this behavior? Like how his kind of believability?
No, I don't think so. But I just like,
okay.
There's a moment where they're like, would you take a polygraph test? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. People who, aren't guilty might say, I want a lawyer here to make sure that I'm not getting, Karen Reeded or whatever. So, he's just not, there's no defenses. His walls are not up, to quote Bethany.
Right.
So basically, he was super cooperative. He took a polygraph test and he passes the polygraph test with flying colors.
Okay.
And so then he's cleared as a potential suspect. And this is actually quite important for the police to do. For the police to publicly come out, Sherri hasn't been found. There's been no evidence, but they're already saying, hey, he's not involved. That's a pretty big step for them to take, to say, we're not worried about this guy.
Yeah, for sure.
So now we're 10 days into the investigation. Sherri's still gone. They find evidence on Sherri's phone that support the theory that Sherri may have taken off. She may have just, literally pieced out.
What do they find?
They find that she had a previous emotional affair with a man named Donovan Miskey. So he and Sherri had met while on a work trip after Keith and Sherri had been married. This is 2 years into their marriage. And Sherri told Donovan that Keith was violent and abusive, and they began a texting relationship about their hopeful fictional life together. I mean, Keith and Sherri have been married for 2 years. They don't have children yet. And she's already literally carrying on texting this other guy she meets on a work trip about alleged abuse and the new life they're going to have together. So Keith actually finds out about this, and it causes, sort of a big rift in their marriage in this moment. And he asks her to get a post-nuptial agreement because he says, I don't want my... Yeah. So they get a post-nup, and he says, a lot of men get hosed in divorce, and he wants to protect his 401k, essentially. So police looked into Donovan as a person of interest as he was on a work trip in San Francisco the day before Sherri went missing, but they did not meet up, and he was soon cleared as a person of interest.
Sorry, the emotional affair, how long ago was it before
that was
the kidnapping?
Years and years ago, like 5 years before.
Okay, so like a year before their daughter is born, because they have a 4-year-old, right? So they go on her phone, and they find like 6-year-old text messages.
Yeah, or maybe, evidence of her and Keith talking. I don't know what the exact evidence was that they found, but basically they see like she had an affair or an emotional affair with this guy. Maybe she just left Keith. Maybe she just left him and their kids. Basically just finding like, okay, there might be some other things at play here besides just like, being kidnapped. So once again, the police are at square one. Donovan's been cleared. No idea. So Keith and the family and friends are able to pull together a ransom and reward for Sherri's return or clues about where Sherri is. They pulled together $50,000. It's posted, it's published, national news reports on it, but still nothing credible, comes to the police. So fast forward to Thanksgiving Day, 22 days after she first disappeared, when a motorist spots Sherri walking along the side of the road in Yolo County, California, which is about 150 miles from Redding.
So 3 weeks later, essentially. Yes. 22 days. Okay. And a motorist just spots her walking by the side of the road.
Right. And if you'll remember, Gabby Petito, like when a blonde white woman goes missing, those days feel very long. Because the nation is counting the days, and it is like it turns into, a media circus. So while it was only 3 weeks, I remember it, and I feel like she was gone for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think that also, if someone's gone for a night, right, there's plausible deniability. And like, I ended up at this place, and I got drunk, and I fell asleep, and here I am the next day at 2 p.m. But once like a couple nights goes by, then I feel like it's like a very sinking, horrific feeling of like, what has happened to this person.
Right. Exactly. So let's listen to the 911 call from the side of the road.
Okay.
Please, Sherri, I need you to listen to me. Listen to me. Do you know where you are?
No. I've been in the car. Yes,
okay. Sweetie, listen to me. I need you to take a deep breath, calm down, and listen to what I'm saying. I have an officer en route. We've had several calls. Are you chained up?
Yes.
Okay, take a deep breath, sweetie. Who chained you up? Do you know the person, or were you kidnapped?
I don't know.
Something I just want to pause and interject with is, like, she is hysterical.
Yeah, the sheer level of histrionics is impressive.
It is impressive, especially, knowing what we know.
Knowing what we know, yeah.
But it is such an intense
performance.
And, what you see, especially throughout the documentary and just and all the footage of her after being found is she deserves an Oscar. She deserves several Oscars, in my opinion. Let's get back to this.
Oh, no, I never saw her face.
Listen to what I'm at. Sherri, take a deep breath, because it's hard to help you if I can't understand you, okay? I know you're upset, but we have help on the way. Sweetie, we have help on the way. Listen to me. Deep breath, Sherri. Deep breath. How did you get chained up? What happened?
She took me.
Who took you?
It's hard to hear, but she's saying, she took me. She took me.
Who took you? Do you know?
No.
Okay.
No, there was two of them.
Okay, listen. I have help on the way.
I want to call my husband. I want to call my husband.
Okay, listen.
Okay. So Sherri is then taken to the hospital, and she has extensive injuries. She's only weighing 87 pounds, and her hair had been cut. The word Exodus had been branded on her back. Her legs and her back had bruises. She had various cuts. And so Keith talks about, the first time he sees her, and he says, "My first sight was my wife in a hospital bed, her face covered in bruises ranging from yellow to black because of her repeated beatings. The bridge of her nose was broken. She had been branded, and I could feel the rise of her scabs under my fingers."
Here's what's crazy about this story, and this is where the limits of my knowledge end, or I feel like I barely know what happens after this, but it's like, this is quite a commitment to the bit, if you will. Like, it's one thing to just be hysterical. It's another thing to be hysterical and 87 pounds and physically beaten and branded. So I'm quite dying to know how this all happened.
Do you really not know much more after
I don't know. All I know is that she ostensibly faked her own kidnapping. That's all I know.
Okay, well, buckle in. So she starts to tell police what has happened. And throughout these initial hours in the day after she's found, she only, Keith has to be there. And this continues on, but she's very needy with Keith. Understandably. I don't mean to use gendered words, but she's just like, I need Keith all the time right next to me because she's, so shaken up, allegedly. So she tells police that she was abducted at gunpoint by 2 Hispanic women in a dark SUV and that the women tortured her and branded her skin. She alleged that the women held her hostage and chained her up in a bedroom for weeks until one of the women released her with a chain around her waist, a zip tie on her wrist, and hose clamps around her ankles. She didn't really know exactly what their motive was. She said that they would tell her that her buyer was so I'm going to assume trafficking was a cop. She basically was like, I don't trust law enforcement because they told me that my buyer was a cop. But, they don't really get any other motive from her. And yeah, go ahead.
The wheels just come a little off the bus for me when it's like, you've committed so much to the physical part of this. We got to come up with a better, more believable narrative. 2 Hispanic women.
First of all, 2 women.
Right.
Yes.
We're going to make this the first of its kind of crime.
Right. I mean, also she's like, what did you hear while you were in this room chained up? And she's like, mariachi music.
No.
I'm not kidding you. It's it's actually just fully racist. And she's just yeah. And also it's just crazy.
She's like, I was kidnapped by 2 Italian women who the whole time just kept feeding me pasta, force feeding me pasta. It's just
all I kept hearing laughable. Was, "That's amore." Anyway, I want to play for you audio of Keith talking about a glimpse of a moment when he first saw Sherri that made him feel like this might have been a lie. Okay. So it's the moment when he first sees her in the hospital. All right.
When you first encountered her in the hospital, what was your first instinct?
When I pulled back the curtain and I saw her and I saw the look in her eyes, I felt in that moment that she was lying. And it wasn't until when I really got close and I could just see the amount of injuries, bruises, burns to her body. And it was a shock to me. And I remember thinking how horrible of me to even think that she could have done this to herself.
Isn't that pretty crazy?
That is crazy.
Especially when you know a person really well and you're you can just read their face so well that he has that millisecond thought of when he first sees her. Anyway, what were you going to say?
No, I think that's it. That perfectly encapsulates it. I think it's very hard to lie convincingly, let alone to lie to someone who knows you really deeply convincingly. And so I think that committing to the physical part of this was one of her only hopes that she was going to be able to pull it off.
Right. Absolutely. So he goes on, he says, "We don't have any reason to not believe her. She was abducted, held captive for 3 weeks, and then released. Traumatized from the experience, and then, of course, very emotional about being released and then being reunited with her husband. Sometimes people who have been in a traumatic event, their mind shields them from some of the trauma, so they have limited recollection or, limited recall. And also, if you try to push them to get some of those details, people can shut down and not want to re-experience or try to recall some of those bad memories." So in The Perfect Wife, you see all of these scenes where it's the detective and it's Keith and it's Sherri, and they're sitting there, it's days, weeks after she's been found, and they're just trying to get the story from her, get more details from her. And she is agonizing over this. It's so emotional for her to talk about. And she doesn't know so many details, but she knows some things, but she doesn't know other things, which is common, within this traumatic event, to not have a perfect memory of everything. She'll say things like, I don't know how I got in the car, but I don't remember how the door opened or whatever, but it was a dark SUV or whatever. And it's like things are missing.
Mm-hmm.
It really makes you think wow, her memory is so spotted because of how traumatic this was.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's really hard for the police to put these clues together and really string together any type of theory. And they don't have a motive. They receive a ton of tips. There's a $10,000 reward for information, and they're unable to solve the case after a year. After a year, it's still just totally cold. And they really hadn't progressed in any meaningful way.
Can I talk to you about a product that you love, that Courtney loves, and that I love?
Please.
Early Bird CBD gummies are so phenomenal, everyone. They are the perfect 2.5 milligrams of THC and 12.5 milligrams of CBD. So this concoction, it gives you the warmest, gooeyest feeling.
They have the magic formula. I love the watermelon flavor. That's my favorite. I also love using them when I know I need to get a good night's sleep and I can sleep in.
You guys, we love Early Bird CBD so much. We reached out to them to see if they'd be interested in sponsoring the show because we were like, these products, these gummies, everyone needs to know about them. We're going to tell them about them anyway. So maybe we can get paid to do it. And honestly, we just cannot recommend them enough. We have a link in our show notes. You can go to earlybirdcbd.com, use code POPApologist20 for 20% off. earlybirdcbd.com, POPApologist20 for 20% off. Do yourself a favor, try the gummies.
They ship to all 50 states, everybody.
You got to try it. earlybirdcbd.com.
So in October 2017, a year after the kidnapping, authorities have a breakthrough. Both male and female DNA was found on Sherri's clothing after her escape, but neither matched anyone in their databases, nor did it match her husband, Keith. So, there's DNA and they're like, who did this belong to? It doesn't, obviously the woman's DNA doesn't belong to anyone in our database. And then you didn't say there was a man involved in your kidnapping.
Right.
So how was there male DNA? At the time, they just kind of said, oh, maybe it was from acquaintances of Sherri's captors who had also owned the clothing. But there was another inconsistency that was sticking with them. Sherri said that she'd cut her foot in an altercation with one of her captors, but she had no injury matching the description when she was hospitalized. And they just sort of thought, oh, maybe, she just has a foggy memory. But that's really those two things are the inconsistencies and the things that don't really add up with Sherri's story that they, discover in 2017. And it's not until March of 2020 that they are able to match the DNA on Sherri to a relative of one of her ex-boyfriends, James Reyes.
Okay, so I think it's really interesting. So this all happens in 2016. She's found. They can't find her captors. I'm very confused. It seems like they just don't stop working on it. Even though she's on some level, it'd be like, well, we got her back. She's found. We couldn't find the captors. Why didn't the case go cold? I'm so surprised.
I mean, I think it did go cold. Cold. But I think it's one of those things where you're just kind of always sort of picking at it and working at it. They might not have had a whole task force dedicated to it like they did when she was first captured. But I think that it was just still open and they were still trying to solve it,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't work in law enforcement, Lauren. I have an amateur podcast.
I mean, do you know why they suddenly got this person's DNA?
I don't know exactly how they suddenly got the relative DNA. What I believe is that it's probably through 23andMe or somehow. I don't know how DNA or DNA databases work, but just remember that they match the DNA on Sherri's clothing to a relative of one of her ex-boyfriends.
Yeah, so I wonder if they have some sort of database where anytime a sample matches to another and it just sends an alert or something.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't understand how DNA works, how it's this is DNA for someone in a family, in your family,
Right.
Anyway. But after they, match it to someone in his family, they then kind of do a little stakeout operation, and they get a green tea bottle from James Reyes's trash can, and then the DNA on that and the DNA on her clothing is a match.
So they are suspicious that it's his ex-boyfriend.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Keep in mind, the police at this time don't know, well, was the ex-boyfriend her captor?
Is the ex-boyfriend, is this the same one she had the emotional affair with, or that's Donovan?
That was
so
Donovan.
What do we know about James Reyes, and how do they even know about him?
Thanks for asking. Well, I think that I'm sure they got an extensive history of everyone she dated or.
Okay.
And I think that even Keith like brought him up. I think that, you know, when they're trying to get so much information, they just like literally ask for such a detailed history.
Right.
Basically, the police then show up at his door and they say, you know, this is August 2020, and they say, hey, we'd like to ask you some questions about Sherri Papini. And James Reyes is just like an open book. And he says, she was hiding out with me here in Costa Mesa.
What?
Sherri had told James that she was being abused sexually and physically by Keith. And that Keith had said to her, if you ever leave me, I'll kill you. So he thought that he was helping her get out of a bad situation. And he said that they had been communicating with burner phones, and that she told him, hey, she sent him basically a plan. You're going to come pick me up, and this is how I'm going to get out of this terrible situation. And then once they got to, you know, his house, she then had him harm her, or she convinced him to basically burn her, just to brand her. She convinced him to harm her by holding a hockey stick out for her to run into. She had him hit her with hockey pucks. Basically, like, he thought that he was helping a friend out. Once again, I don't really understand how any of this makes sense to him in his brain, that I need to hurt her in order to like help her.
Well, she must have said, I have to come up with a story of why I've been gone. So this is going to be my story. And this is going to help me come up with, you know, this is going to help corroborate it.
Well, but she also, the reason why she leaves is she was just like, I miss my kids.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She also had a burner phone the whole time where she was watching all of the kidnapping coverage.
I mean, it'd be hard not to Google my name at the time as well. So
Sure.
I get it, Sherri. But no, I think that a situation where people, like, if a friend is asking you to burn them, to, you know, hold out a hockey stick so they can run into it and cause themselves injuries, think twice before we help out our friends.
Yeah, I can't believe we're having to repeat ourselves, but if your friends, you know, ask you to brand them, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Also, what's interesting about this is that, so he like tells police everything. And he says also, like, I went to work every day. So like she would stay home and also inflict more harm on herself. Like, she bought a bunch of cleaning products, or she had him buy a bunch of cleaning products. She then like used them to scrub the floor. And I think that like in a very intense way, she like kind of used those cleaning products to give herself a rash. She also ate extremely little, which is how, you know, she was able to lose so much weight.
I think that in itself, like, someone that can starve them. I mean, how tall is she? Do you have any idea? Like, how low?
She's tiny. I think she's tiny.
She's tiny.
Yeah. I think she was like 100 pounds when she was kidnapped, and then she returns at 87 pounds.
Maybe it was just a ton of adrenaline, but being able to drop that much weight that quickly, that just also goes to show, like, this woman is depraved.
To fight your own instincts to eat when you can eat. Also, I think another part of this is that I think James thought they were going to get together. Okay. So like, he's kind of like,
after it all died down,
or just during. And I don't even think there was I think he was just kind of like, she's going through this, but like at the end of it, like, we're going to end up together. Because I don't even think they hooked up or anything while she was there.
I thought that it was like, you know, she just wanted to, as Heather McDonald would say, get some fresh D. But this was not a sexual dalliance. I don't think so. I
don't think for her. I think for him, it was like, that was the ultimate goal, or a relationship of some sort, but not for her. I will say it strains credulity that James is just like kind of like waiting for like the light at the end of the tunnel where she's just going to bounce back to normal and be like, okay, now we're together. Even though she's like making national headlines, national news, like Nancy Grace is talking about her being missing. So basically after the 22 days or 21 days, she says like, I miss my kids, drive me back.
Okay.
And he says that he just like dropped her off on the side of the road where she wanted to be dropped off. And she doesn't even say goodbye when she gets out of the car.
This is insane.
I know. So obviously, like, investigators are just like totally blown away. Another important detail here. Investigators go to James's house to question him. And there's this funny moment where like his bird escapes while they're like knocking on the door when he opens the door. So like one investigator, I think he tells them that they can come inside. One investigator goes inside the house and the other one stays outside trying to help him like find his bird. And the investigator that goes inside the house recognizes the room that Sherri has described, you know, with this kind of like unique closet and this. He literally takes one look at this room and he's like, this is where she was, because she described the room that she was being held in such, you know, intense detail. And, you know, the way to be a good liar is to basically tell mostly the truth.
So there's less to remember.
Exactly. So I'm going to play now the moment where interrogators call Sherri and Keith back into their office and they, you know, say, we need to talk to you again. And Keith thinks, oh my gosh, they found something.
So Sherri and Keith have gone on to stay together. Yes. She's just like, oh, yeah, I got rescued or I got dropped off. Yes. We're good to go. We're G2G.
So at this time, for the last like several years, they've been just like trying to rebuild a normal life. And, you know, Sherri has to sleep with all of the lights on. She's going to intensive therapy, which the state is paying for. She's getting money from the Victims Relief Fund. She's just very fragile, understandably. But, you know, it's really still hard for them to like live a normal life. Like she wanted to keep all the windows covered. He talks about how like after it had been a very long time, they were able to like go out in public together as a family. And basically, you know, it's just like.
So they're dealing with her PTSD and trauma from her fake kidnapping.
He even has a moment, I guess, where he's like, he says, you know, she was starting to like have a meltdown and he's like, hey, can you just go? I understand that you need to cry. It's totally fine that you need to cry, but can you go into the other room? Like this is going to, the kids would get very upset by her being so emotional. Right. And he's like, can you just go be in another part of the house? And she like freaks out. And she says to him, he said, you know, without even missing a beat, she says to me, I have to live with the fact that you didn't find me.
Oh my gosh. This woman is a total nightmare.
It's diabolical. I mean, it's a personality disorder. So I also want to say that there's this video that I think is very revealing. And it's like a home video of them all sitting around the table. They're eating dinner or something. And Sherri is like eating. And then she starts to cough because she's like, food has gone down the wrong pipe or whatever. And she's coughing very intensely. And she's like, she's fine. But it's like she's coughing for probably 20 seconds or so. And her little boy starts to like hysterically cry at the sight of her coughing. Okay. And she's like, oh, mommy's fine. Everything's fine. And they kind of laugh about it in the moment. But he's very shaken up by like seeing her, you know, in a state of distress. And I think it just reveals, you know, how much stress the whole family was under because of her strong emotions that she was having post the kidnapping.
I'm willing to wager that it wasn't just like Sherri's post kidnapping PTSD that was the sole display or expression of her like profound mental illness. I'm sure this also showed up in other places. So this was probably anything but a stable environment for those kids.
Absolutely. A little detail in the, you know, the post-kidnapping story. The family of Tara Smith, the girl who had gone missing in 1998, hosts a party, like a celebratory she's back, she's been found party. Okay. And to like celebrate her. And it's just like, that's another example of like knowing what she did, like how comfortable she was manipulating people and lying to people who had been victims themselves of a kidnapping.
Right.
Also, another thing. Okay. This is so wackadoodle. So they have like a celebration with friends or whatever. I don't think it's the same one as, you know, Tara Smith's families, but they have a celebration and Sherri wants everyone to go around and talk about where they were when they found out that she was alive. And there's Ring camera footage from close couple friends of theirs where like the husband's outside mowing or something. And the wife is like, they found her alive, you know, freaking out, so joyous. And the husband and wife like hug and they're like kind of crying. And they're just like, I can't even believe this. Like she's alive. And she like made them like replay the video like several times. And Keith is like, it was just kind of awkward.
It definitely is awkward.
I think if your husband is feeling like it's not like cathartic, like it's awkward.
No, it's totally awkward, but I can also see wanting to see that as well. You know, putting myself in Sherri's shoes. It's a unique experience.
It's totally normal to, I think, want to see the video, but I think it's the replaying. That's just like a little bit like weird.
Okay, so they finally bring Keith and Sherri in to talk to them about this.
Yeah. Once again, it's been several years. Keith thinks they have had some amazing breakthrough.
So the DNA came back to James Ray's.
The DNA that was on you belongs to James Ray's.
The picture in the, can I get the picture? The picture of the table is James Ray's little brother who died recently. We talked to him. He's been on a polygraph. We talked to everybody around him. We have the rental agreements, phone rental, the car rental agreements. We have everything that says that he said he told the truth.
That's James' brother, deceased Nick.
So everything, you've told us so many truths in this situation. The reason why you can describe the room is because you stayed in the room in the dark for hours, for days on end. The reason why you lost so much weight is because you stopped eating. The reason why you got a rash on your arm is because you cleaned his house. The reason why the brand is because he went to the store, bought the branding tools, and branded you. The reason why your nose was broke is because of a hockey stick. All of that because he passed a polygraph test that said it's not an abduction. She asked me to come get her.
No.
I rented a car.
No.
I drove up and picked her up. He passed the polygraph test, Sherri.
This isn't making any sense.
No, it's not making sense, Sherri. The parts that don't make
it's James.
No, the parts that don't make sense are that you're accusing two females who abducted you when it was James. The part that you were branded, James did it. He told me he did it. Who would sit there and say, I branded Sherri on her right shoulder blade? Who does that?
And told us how and showed us the letters that matched the brand.
Took us to the store and pointed out the letters. You could do the polygraph and try to, whatever parts you're confused about.
Can you go? Is that what you're saying?
Can I talk to you outside real quick?
Do that
I'm
there.
late.
That's fine. The fears of how out of control everything got, the fear of all these things is the reality.
Just to pause it, Keith then leaves to go talk in the hallway to an investigator.
I'm the idiot husband that stayed around the whole time.
Well, there's not. It's still, we can't tell you a lot.
This is Keith now talking to investigators, where he says, I'm the idiot husband who stayed around the whole time.
I don't want her anywhere around my kids or around me at all at this point.
And again, we've talked a lot. I don't know what the next stages of this are.
It's not us together, I tell you that one.
So basically, in that moment, after discovering all that, Keith is just like, fuck it. You know,
right.
Understandably. But Sherri is not like, I'm caught.
Right. I think also, of course, Keith is thinking, I don't want this woman around my children. Clearly, she's capable of the unthinkable.
Right.
And so I don't know, what else she would do, especially in a state where she's been caught. And so she's going to be especially volatile.
Right.
This is wild. But Sherri is not confessional.
No. She just keeps saying, this doesn't make sense. She also says, I don't want to get her in trouble. She saved my life. What she's referencing is that one of the women who allegedly kidnapped her let her go at the end. And so she's saying, I'm not going to give her up because she saved my life. She literally goes, she's the only reason why I can hold my babies today. I'm not going to give her up. And she's just like sticking to that story. Yeah. She's like just fully not on planet Earth.
Okay.
I think they even asked her something like, at one point, was he keeping you there? But she's just not even like, she just keeps saying, I'm not going to ruin her life. She's the only reason I'm alive. Also, it's worth noting that she referred to the two women, the names she gave them were Smegma and Taint.
Okay.
So anyway, that's just a small detail.
Before the truth had been uncovered, she was saying that she was held captive. But now that the truth has been uncovered, she has this new part of the narrative where there's this like savior.
No. She had always said that one of the women had cut her zip ties or had let her go.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. And one more thing about Keith in this moment. So Sherri is confronted by the police, but, she's not arrested in that moment. So her and Keith leave together. And Keith talks about how after this, it's just like so baffling to him because does not even realize like the gravity of what has just happened.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she goes back to, I think, like her sister's place or something, and he goes to see her, and she like starts undressing, and she like wants to have sex, and she's like, it's totally fine, I'm gonna take a plea deal, I love you.
Wait, what?
And he's just like, he says I think he like ran out of the house because it was just like, who is this person?
Right.
And he like has to protect his children. So they don't even arrest Sherri until 2022, until 18 months after they confront her about it, because I think obviously they need to build their case so that they can like
And what are
put her
they
behind
arresting her
bars.
for specifically? That's what I'm curious about, because like in theory, is it for lying to police officers? Because you can't really arrest someone for just like leaving, right?
Right. No. So she's arrested and charged with making false statements to a federal law enforcement officer and engaging in mail fraud, which is in relation to her like saying like receiving $30,000 from the California Victims Compensation Board.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they arrest her. She pleads guilty to 1 count each of lying to a federal officer and mail fraud. She says in a statement through her attorney, I'm deeply ashamed of myself for my behavior and so sorry for the pain I've caused my family, my friends, all the good people who needlessly suffered because of my story, and those who worked so hard to try to help me. I will work the rest of my life to make amends for what I've done. So in September of 2022, she's sentenced to 18 months in prison for the hoax in order to pay back more than $300,000 in restitution, for government funds. And the judge makes an example out of her. He actually sentences her. The 18 months is 10 months more than what the prosecution had even recommended.
Oh, wow.
And the Sherri's hoax cost the California Victims Compensation Board more than $30,000 for her ambulance ride and therapy visits after her false abduction. The fake kidnapping cost the United States Social Security Administration more than $127,000, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office $146,000, and the FBI $2,500. It doesn't seem that much for the FBI.
I gotta say, I kind of thought this was going to be like a torrid love affair, but it's really just a woman that's deeply mentally ill who had a crazy episode, right?
Let's get into it not being her first time faking.
Oh my gosh.
Because I think that might be interesting to kind of unwind the psyche. So according to the Sacramento Bee, Sherri's mother filed a police report in 2003 accusing Sherri of doing the same and blaming her for it in 2003. She said to police that her daughter was allegedly self-harming and trying to blame the wounds on her, as the mom. And this is in 2003. The incident report reads, RP, which I think is the mother, states her 21-year-old daughter that was living with her was harming herself and blaming it on RP. So Sherri's parents also accused her of burglary and making unauthorized withdrawals from their checking accounts. There's just like other stuff from Keith where he says, there's a lot of things I didn't question. I grew up with a lovely mother and father. I was never around a dishonest person to that extent growing up. And when we first got together and told me things, I believed her. I wouldn't know why I wouldn't.
Yeah.
He's a very just like normal, earnest guy. And he says, she told me she went to college down in Orange County. She told me she was in ballet. She told me she used to sell cars at a dealership and all these different things. I wasn't going to go calling around to verify that those were real. Like there were definitely some things where I'm like, hey, the timeline doesn't match up. Like you said you did this or you lived at this spot, but that doesn't make sense to me because the timeline's not right. And he said that she always had a way of skirting around it. When Keith would call her out for lying, she would say, well, this is because of my childhood and you didn't experience that because you had loving parents. And, she would twist it. And then it would be like, he would say, oh, I'm so sorry. Let me give you a hug. And then they would kind of move on. So it was just like very toxic.
Right.
I can't take responsibility for anything.
Well, and also just to honest people, to normal people, you don't think to verify normal biographical parts of people's lives. If someone says, oh, I took this ballet class in Orange County, you're not like, well, let me Google if that ballet studio ever existed, and if you actually lived there at the time, and let me get the records from your landlord. Like it just, you take the people at face value for the most part until they kind of prove themselves to be liars.
Right. And I think she also got some of her like abuse stories like mixed up. Like she told her friend that she had gotten a mark on her back from Keith, I believe. And then I think she told another person, or she told Keith that mark was from her dad abusing her when she was younger. So just like little lies, but then also medium to big lies to then huge lies. And I think that's what's really scary is that I think all met people who like lie about little things. And it's just kind of like, why did you do that? Like that amounted to nothing. Like, what's your end game with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we also have all encountered people who are pathological liars. Like everyone knows one person who's a pathological liar. I can think of two people in my life experience who I think are full pathological liars. One we both know. Actually, both we know, but one who we worked with.
Yeah.
And I just think that you start to really wonder, what is this person capable of? If they can just look at me and lie so convincingly about X, Y, or Z,
right?
Like what? It's profoundly unsettling.
It is. And I think meanwhile, she's like clinging to Keith. Like she loves him so much. It's their family. It's a very like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde type of situation.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah, sorry, Jekyll.
Dr. Jekyll.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jingle Jangle. So we're we're almost done, but I have to just share one more sort of really dark thing about Sherri that didn't come to light until after kind of all this dust had settled. So Keith says that they get a divorce and Sherri's in prison. And he says, one day after Sherri was already in prison, as I go to put my daughter to bed, I sort of, push off the bed and I kind of make a little grunt sound like, like I was a little bit sore. And his daughter says, Daddy, are you sick? Why don't you do mommy's trick? And he goes, Mommy's trick? What are you talking about? And she goes, well, you just breathe in this rubbing alcohol. And he's like, what? And then Violet goes up to the bathroom. She knows right where the rubbing alcohol is. She wads up a thing of toilet paper and just soaks it and then hands it to me to breathe. And Keith said, he said to Violet, how often did you do this? To which she said, well, when we got sick, we did it every single day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just confused. I don't get it. So she used rubbing alcohol to make herself throw up? I didn't know that could make you throw up.
Well, I don't know if it makes you throw up, but it would make you nauseous. It doesn't say here, but he said he later found out that Sherri would soak rags of alcohol and put it in a Ziploc bag that she would tie around her children's neck so that they would continue to smell the fumes to make them not feel good and so that she could take them to the doctor.
Wait, what? So she was making her kids sick?
Yeah, there was full Munchausen's by proxy happening.
Okay, so where is Sherri now?
So Sherri and Keith are divorced, and Sherri was released from prison in August of 2023. And she actually got out of prison 8 months early. And she went to a halfway home. And now she's out of there. And she's on supervised release until late 2026.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something like, now she lives in Saint-Tropez, with X, Y, or Z.
No, I mean,
now she swindled this guy.
Well, actually, there's more.
Okay.
She owes the government a ton of money. And she has a new boyfriend who she's living with, who they live in a nice home that's valued at $750,000. She's driving a brand new Jeep SUV.
Great.
She claims to have an income of just $1,000 a month, of half of which she says she pays out in rent. She was previously awarded $10,000 in the divorce in order to pay half of a $3,000 debt she racked up on a Best Buy credit card after she was arrested in April 2022. Her new boyfriend, though, this is where things get interesting. And also, this is more theorizing.
Okay.
I don't have any hard evidence about this. So just everyone, put on your tinfoil hats.
Okay.
But basically, this man that she's dating, Sean Hibden, was a wealthy owner of several car dealerships, but he's a widower. And his wife's death is suspicious because she died 4 days after asking for a divorce. From Sean.
What?
And there's she died from COVID, which many people died from COVID, but a lot of people are very suspicious. I mean, there's a whole page, Justice for Brittany.
Wow.
And yeah, and Sherri and Sean were, I think, corresponding in prison.
Were they corresponding when Sean was still married or when his ex-wife was still alive, or no?
I think no.
Regardless,
no, I don't think so.
Sean's still off his rocker if he's writing Sherri Papini, love notes in prison.
Oh, absolutely. I think the last thing I read about Keith was that he had been laid off from his job at his Geek Squad job at Best Buy. And she was asking Keith to pay her legal fees, which I just think is so insane, even though he's raising their 2 children. And yeah, she got a book deal, and she also has signed for an interview with an investigation discovery series that will air in 2025.
So we'll hear Sherri's side of the story, whatever it is that she's going to concoct and put out there.
Totally.
All right. Well,
her kids are also now, they're 11 and 13. And I think they have like supervised visitation or something like that. I don't know. It's just, I just feel really sad for her sister, her ex-husband, Keith, and for her children.
Yeah.
Who were just like needlessly put through all of this.
No, absolutely. And Nancy Grace and our mom. I think our mom was following this, you know, her emotions were put through the ringer.
Yeah.
Chandler, thank you for leading us through this deep dive on Sherri Papini.
You're welcome. I'm glad you found it to be interesting. You didn't actually say that you found it to be interesting though. So
no, I do find this to be interesting, but I don't need 3 episodes of a documentary about it. I actually think this was the perfect, succinct way to share this story.
To quote you, I could not disagree more.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think everyone should watch, especially episode 2 of The Perfect Wife on Hulu. It's an hour long. It's not that big of a deal. Everyone watches a lot of TV. And to see the video footage of her recounting her story to investigators in the aftermath, it's the performance.
Yeah.
The performance is unreal.
Well, your performance was wonderful as well. Many claps for you, Chandler. Everyone, thank you for being here with us today. And we'll be back on Patreon on Friday. Anything else, Chan, before we sign off?
No. Ta-ta.
All right.
Blessings on your road.
Blessings on your road. And everyone, please spread the word of Pop Apologists to all corners of the earth. Okay. Share the good news that this podcast is available. People can listen.
As you're on your road, wherever your road will take you, well, you know, whether you're faking your own kidnapping by the side of the road, share the word of Pop Apologists.
Blessings on your road. Bye.
Bye.
That's all for now, folks. Don't forget, give us a 5-star review, hit us up on Instagram at PopApologists, and we will see you next week, live every Wednesday.